Welcome to another episode of The Next Generation. Today on the podcast, I have the amazing Allie Spears, or as some of you may know her as the AgChicks. I am so excited to have Allie on today. She is a fellow podcast host, women in agriculture, advocate, all of the things, and she just has a really awesome story, and I cannot wait to share more of her experience, knowledge about her with all of you guys. So Allie, I'm not going to blab too long. Please take it away. Tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what you do, and who you are.
Yes, for sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on. I'm super honored. It's very weird for me sometimes to be on this side of the podcast. Usually I'm in your seat getting to ask the questions and kind of take a deep breath. So, yeah, super excited to be on. Thank you so much for having me. But I guess the easiest place to start is kind of at the beginning, kind of my childhood, I guess, and I won't bore you with all of the details. But I grew up originally in Northern California. That's where I'm originally from, on my family's generational farming ranching operation. And so I consider myself to be fourth generation. I know everybody's kind of definition of generational involvement of agriculture can be different, but I consider myself fourth generation. Like I said, I grew up on my family's farming and ranching operation. We had cattle that started out as a registered Angus herd and then has since kind of transformed into many things. But registered Angus is where it all started, and then was involved in 4-H and FFA, did livestock judging, traveled across the country exhibiting cattle. We showed pigs and sheep locally at our county fair. And then, yeah, like I said, traveled everywhere showing cattle. So that's kind of my childhood, was going to a cattle show or going to a sporting event for my brother was kind of what our weekends entailed. And then for college, I knew I really wanted to leave California. So I made the jump and drove the 1,800 miles to Texas to attend Texas A&M, and here I am 10 years later. I never left. So Texas was a good move for me. But yeah, I got my undergrad at Texas A&M, and now working on my PhD. I work here at the university and have had lots of different things that have come up over the past 10 years, and even more so like over the past 4 years, I'd say, just from kind of this whole world of ag communications and starting a podcast, having social media, all of the things that I never thought I would be doing. But here I am, being a podcast guest on someone else's podcast to talk about all of those things.
Yes. Oh my gosh, that's a perfect little brief intro. Can you go into just the journey of going from California to Texas, going into college and being like, hey, I am going to do this communication thing. And then not only am I going to do that, I'm going to do it on a very public stage, diving into podcasting and social media and all of those things while also still being a grad student and still pursuing furthering your degree.
Yes. So I knew, like I said, I knew I wanted to leave California because I honestly thought I would be going back at some point. Had the unique opportunity to get to travel quite a bit while I was, younger and in my high school developmental age, developmental time period, I guess, in my life. And so I knew I really wanted to leave and kind of do something different, learn different things, get different perspective on things to bring that back kind of to California. Honestly thought I was going to do law and was going to go into water law, which if anyone's familiar with California and all of the craziness that goes on there from a water standpoint, that probably would have been perfect. Probably could have been making quite a bit of money if I would have decided to go that route. But came to Texas, absolutely fell in love with it. And that kind of led me on this whole other journey that I didn't think about, wasn't expecting. My undergrad was actually ag business. So again, was kind of dabbling in that like potential, like maybe I want to go to law school. Maybe I want to potentially go back and help my dad's agriculture business, start a ag business, something business based. And then shortly, so I was on the livestock judging team here at A&M during my time. And so because of that, I did not take advantage of internship opportunities. So if anyone's listening who is still in those formative years of deciding to do things, do the internships because it makes everything so much easier. So when I graduated, very worst possible outcome of like, I had no plan. So I did a few long-term internships right after my graduation. One being at the State Fair of Texas, because I thought maybe I wanted to go into um, livestock shows and kind of run the back end of things. Quickly decided that was something that I was not necessarily great at or wanted to do forever, but really got a whole new gain of respect for the people that do run livestock shows because, man, they have a tough job. Um, so yeah, that kind of led me to my current role here at Texas A&M, where I'm a program coordinator. So I focus on youth recruitment and getting students to want to be interested in poultry, which I have zero poultry background. So it's kind of funny that I'm doing that. But yeah, and then that kind of led me down to being around this environment of higher education on a constant daily occurrence and wanting to kind of go back to school. But that was like a very long-winded answer, and I feel like I didn't even give you the answer or give you an answer to your question. But by being involved in higher education and then also kind of during COVID, we obviously, like most of the world, went home. We're working from home. And so I had a lot of time on my hands. And I really felt that like connection and draw back to my agricultural roots of like, I'm not really sure what this looks like in my current life, but I definitely want to get back to ag. And so my boyfriend was out fishing on the Brazos River. He found a calf that had like fallen from a cliff. And he called me and he was like, hey, I think you need to come, help me with this calf. I don't know what to do. I don't know if she's going to make it, but like, what should we do? So I was like, yes, I've been training for this like my whole life. Like, I'm coming, going to the feed store, grabbing a bottle, and I'm on my way. And so I went out there. We ended up loading her up into the front seat of my F-150, and she snored the 45-minute drive back to where we live. And she truly thought she was a dog for the first year of her life, but she was our little COVID calf. It was kind of what our joke became. And she really was kind of that nudge for me of like, okay, yes, like this is a big part of your life that's been missing and you need to get back to this. So that kind of started the whole social media stuff with sharing her honestly on my Snapchat at first, and people were like wound up about it. And so I was like, okay, I think there's something here. Maybe I should start an Instagram and kind of go down that whole rabbit hole of things. And that's really where like the furthering my education in agriculture communications came from, is I kind of felt like I don't know if I have all the tools in my toolbox of being able to kind of talk about agriculture on a platform. So that's kind of what led me into grad school and everything else, I guess, too.
Yeah, I would love to hear more of just your insight on like finding your place in ag. You kind of talked about just a second ago about like not really knowing where you fit in, what you wanted to do, getting done with your undergrad and being like, I have no plan. I don't know what I'm doing with my life. All of the things like that. Just talking about kind of like refinding your rhythm. You never really left ag, but finding, I guess, a professional career in ag and then also something that you're so passionate.
Yeah, so I think that was the theme of my story, was like not really knowing where I fit into agriculture, and that being like a constant struggle and stressor, honestly, of like maybe not even agriculture, but just kind of like that weird phase of life where you're like, I don't really know what I'm doing. I kind of like this, I kind of like that. What can I make a career out of? And so that's kind of where I was. And I really enjoy my role with the university, but again, was kind of missing that like connection to ag on a deeper level. Grew up obviously in production agriculture. So that's kind of what I had always known as being like, if you're involved in agriculture, like it's got to be production based, which could not be further from the truth. Now, all of the things I've experienced and seen, like obviously not the case. There's so many different things you can be involved with and still be connected to agriculture. But yeah, it was kind of like a self discovery, and that's really truly. There's a couple different, I guess, reasons the podcast started, but that's kind of how the podcast started, was what are other people doing in agriculture? Like selfishly, I'm going to reach out to them and see if they'll hop on a podcast, and I'm going to record it and I'm going to put it out there as a podcast. But really, I'm asking the questions for myself to kind of figure out what the heck am I doing in my life? And so that's really where AgChicks started. And then about 10 episodes in, I realized, hey, these are all women that I'm talking to. Might as well kind of follow this trend and really brand it as women in agriculture who are doing big things and are leading these very successful careers within our industry. And again, answering some of those questions for myself to kind of pave a path, but then also through it, I would get so many questions from younger individuals, or even people who were older, still trying to kind of figure out like the next phase of life or maybe a career change. And so that really kind of led to what has now become AgChicks and the platform of sharing women's story in agriculture.
Yeah, and you have built such an amazing platform, but I'm sure it wasn't an easy path to get there. It wasn't an easy couple years or year that you had to spend in that I have no idea what I'm doing with my life part of life. And honestly, for me, I had that own version in my own life, and I feel like many people do, especially when you leave undergrad, and especially if you're even more so if you're part of like a judging team or a sports team or something like that, where you are just so plugged in to university activities at all times. And then that all ends and you're like, okay, what do I enjoy? What do I like doing? And when you're on a livestock judging team, that takes up the majority of your time during your undergrad when you're not in classes. And so for me, it was a big moment of, okay, I have to figure out what do I actually like doing? Like what do I enjoy doing outside of this, outside of college, outside of like these other things that I was involved in that I can't necessarily take into my professional career now. And I never took that time as an undergraduate student to kind of let myself figure that out. I stayed so busy the entire time that I didn't allow any room to breathe or any room to kind of sit in uncomfortable. And then after I graduated, it was like a big fat slap in the face of, oh, okay, I don't have a life anymore. What am I doing with this? Where do I find joy? And the thing is like, ag is so small, but it is so diverse. And so you graduate and you look at it and you're like, what do I could literally do anything. And that's for me analysis paralysis of there's too many options. I need you to give me like 5 and I can pick from there. But if you give me like 500, I screw that. I have no idea what I'm supposed to be doing with my life. And I think a lot of young individuals kind of go through that, and it might be one of those things that everyone just kind of has to go through and figure out themselves. But what advice do you kind of have for that season of still just trying to figure it the hell out?
Yeah, no, I think to some degree, I feel like some days I'm still in that season of trying to figure it the hell out. But no, I think that's such a like important stage that most people go through, but we don't really talk about it because I think the thought or norm is like you graduate and then you have a job waiting for you at the end, which in most cases that's not the case. Like you have to do a little bit of self-discovery. Or again, like you said, you're so busy during your time in college that you like know that next step is coming, but haven't really like fully thought through it. And like you're still kind of trying to figure out how to be an adult. And so there's like all these different things that no one really kind of tells you or warns you about, but it's definitely part of that phase. Um, but yeah, in terms of advice, this is kind of a conversation I get to have on a daily basis, usually with high school students, which thinking back to me in high school, I thought I had the world figured out, obviously, but had no clue what was going to happen. But my kind of advice to them is figure out what you like and kind of start a list of like, okay, these are the things I like. These are some things I don't like. And I think internships really are a great opportunity. I tell our college students all the time, like a opportunity or an internship that you don't like is not a failure. Like that's honestly a success in my book because you are just one step closer to figuring out what you do want to do, and kind of narrowing down those things of like, I do not want to live in a different state, or I do not want to, my perfect example for poultry is I do not want to work in a processing facility in the middle of Alabama, like those types of things. So going out and really getting to experience those types of things. And then also like this is advice I wish someone would have given me. Now, would I have taken this? I don't know, because I have become a completely different person than I was in undergrad. Definitely like a more reserved kind of shy person, like would go to things because I had to, or not be like the first person to stick my hand out, which now I feel like I'm much better at that. And maybe that just comes with maturity, but going to networking events, going to conferences, all of those different things where you just have no idea who you're going to meet and come across, because those for me have been the most impactful relationships and like doors opening, because again, you never know who you're going to meet or who they know, who they can connect you to just from like simple conversations about talking about your interests. Um, the other thing I would say is people in agriculture, for the most part, are overwhelmingly excited to help that next generation. And so if they can help in any way, shape, or form, they want to. Like they want to talk about their experiences. And so I think the hardest part maybe is just asking the first question, or again, putting your hand out for the first interaction. But once you do that, it really can lead to so many different doors opening and so many different opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And in my experience, it's always that first step that is the hardest. And it really, like, networking and putting yourself out there is a muscle that you have to continue to flex and build. And it's not something that's going to come overnight. Even if you're like a super extroverted person and love to talk to people, still like the art of working a room and like getting to know people and leading conversations like with intention and stuff like that is still a skill that you probably have to develop. And for me, it was the repetition of like, do I want to go to another networking event? No. Am I going to because I need to build the skill? Yes.
Yes. Yeah.
And still to this day, I still have things I need to work on. Like, I still have like areas that I'm like, oh, I really want to hound in on this. I really want to be able to communicate in this way and stuff like that. But honestly, the biggest part about agriculture being so small is that networks are so intertwined, and you never know who you're going to meet at a networking event or just at an event in general. That it might not be a networking event. It might be like you're going to NCBA and you just put yourself out there and you go to a young cattlemen's meeting or something like that. And you never know who you're going to meet that's connected to someone that is your end goal, or someone that is going to put you into connection with your dream job or stuff like that. Because it is a blessing and a curse that agriculture is so small. It really is. It's
Yes.
amazing, but it's also terrifying that like you go to events and you say your name and then they're like, oh my God, I know your dad, or I
Mm-hmm.
know blah, 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 who knows blah, blah, blah. And then like you find a common connection, and it's crazy how intertwined it is. But for me, it was go to an event and don't network for like an end goal, network for like 5 years down the road, because you don't, most of the time, connections that you make aren't going to pay off right away. Sometimes they will. Sometimes they're going to be connections that are going to put you in connection with someone else that is then going to get you that dream job. But sometimes it's just making a connection and really like forming a great conversation with someone that 5 years down the road you're applying for an internship or you're applying for a grant or something like that, and you're like, oh my gosh, that person I talked to at that event a few years ago is now the chairman of this blah blah blah. Let me reach out to them, send them a quick email or something and touch base, or try to do a virtual coffee date or something like that, that it pays off dividends in the end. And so I guess where I'm getting at with all of this is it is a muscle that you have to stretch. It's uncomfortable. It's not fun, really, for a lot of people in the beginning, even us extroverts. Like I'm an extroverted person and I love talking, but it is one of those things that when I was in college or younger, it was intimidating. Like,
Oh
okay,
yeah.
you're going to have me go have conversations with like CEOs of these big businesses or people that would be potentially hiring me. That's terrifying. Like, how am I supposed to be myself and also like be professional? And it's genuinely just a muscle you have to stretch, and a place that you got to get a little uncomfortable in order to like put yourself out there.
Yeah. No, and I think kind of two things honestly to that. I feel like too for agriculture, like business cards is not necessarily a dying or dead breed, especially at some of these conferences and um, business meetings, I guess, for like different industry things. So even if you don't necessarily like have a business card to take with you, like get people's business cards when you go to the tables or when you're interacting with someone. I have found, like, as old school as that may sound, like getting a business card and then like walking away and writing a note to myself on that business card of like potential things we talked about in that conversation, or like potential connections I see for future, or even if I'm like, yeah, I don't know any, like, I don't know what this one could lead to, but just like a quick note about what we talked about, maybe. I have found that a weird thing, but also like a very helpful thing to go back on when I get home and like looking through the stack of cards and being like, okay, yeah, this person I thought would be a good guest for the podcast, or a good person to come speak to my class for my students, like those different kinds of things. Again, just kind of a weird hack, but maybe that's helpful for somebody because it is so overwhelming. And I always say I'm like a learned extrovert, so I can do it if I have to, but I'm not like, I would prefer not to, kind of thing. But also just like having a list, a mental list of like things you can talk about with anyone, like football, the weather, like stupid things, but just like things you can go to if it's like super awkward and you have no idea what to say, like just kind of that roll of things you could run through of like anyone could answer that question or you could spark up a conversation with anyone about.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing that I did when I was in my undergrad and looking for my first job out of college, I went to NCBA, the convention that year. And what I did is instead of carrying around business cards and giving people business cards, or carrying around my resume or stuff like that, I actually created a little, it's like a link page, but it's a little bit different. It's like a mesh between a link page and a website. It's called, I think it was like Masha, Masha key something. I don't know. It was an app, and you go and like create it, and then it gives you like a link. And so then I took that link and I went and created a free QR code. And then I still have the QR code on my phone to this day. And I created a widget on my home screen of my phone, and when I would meet people and they like, we hit it off or something like that, I'd be like, hey, I have this link if you want to scan it, and it has my cover letter, my resume, my portfolio, my website. It had like all of these things that I couldn't necessarily fit all onto a business card. But then it like people scanned it, and then they could like send me their contact card too. And then I had it in my phone immediately and could follow up with them the next week through an email or a text or a phone call or stuff like that. And I walked out of there with like, in a couple months after that, I had 4 job offers from people that I met there, that 2 of them created jobs for me. Like they
Yeah,
didn't really have job openings, but we hit it off so well. And that was such a good exchange and experience for them. You have to make it stupidly easy for people, honestly.
100%.
Like, as a person myself who went through a hiring process recently and opened up internships and stuff like that for my business, it was, you have to, like, I don't have time to sit here and like search for things. I can't like, also don't like give me your paper resume that's going to get stuck into my briefcase and
Right.
probably not seen again or stuff like
Yeah.
that. Like, you have to make it so easy for these people to remember who you are and like what you talked about. And so a hack that I learned in college was like finding a way to talk about something that is original to you, that like they're going to remember you, because people don't necessarily remember names all the time. But if you give them something like a fun fact about you, like you can bring that into a conversation, somehow they're going to remember that about you over like, oh hey, you were the girl that XYZ, or like something like that when you see them at like the bar that evening, or
Yeah.
just like in relation to like the NCBA event and stuff like that. And so it's, it is not easy, but use technology to your advantage too. Like, you have to put yourself in the shoes of these hiring managers and as these people who are like at these networking events of like, for me, for my internship application, I got over 100 applications that came in just a
Dang.
couple weeks. And
Yeah.
going through that is overwhelming for these people. And so it's like, find a way to differentiate yourself and make yourself stand the hell out.
Yeah, for sure. And because I mean, my personal opinion, right? Because the use of social media and all of these half the time free technologies are available to us, like definitely use what's at your fingertips. And yeah, use them too in a way that helps you stand out, just like you mentioned. Like that's such a good idea. Well, now there's also like a business card, I feel like, that
Yeah,
is
like
like, is it
dots,
Dot? Yeah,
and
I
there's
just
like
saw
a
that.
few others that like you can literally like tap your phone and it like sends them all the
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah, which is like crazy to think about. So, yeah, use those resources to your advantage for sure, because like you said, got to stand out with when there's hundreds, maybe even thousands of people that they're talking to through a hiring process or even at a convention, whatever the heck it may be that you're attending and trying to stand out through. So, yeah, no,
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah, absolutely. I would love to kind of shift gears a little bit from just like that topic that we were just talking about and into your passion for women in agriculture, and just talk about a little bit more about kind of finding that place where you do have a really big passion for. And then also maybe talk about it not being your only passion. You are also in higher education and you also have your podcast and like you do a lot of things. And just talk a little bit about that journey.
Yeah. So in terms of women in agriculture, I have a younger brother, but I'm the oldest child, I guess. And I would say one thing for me growing up was my dad, like never my dad, parents, family, nobody ever treated me differently because I was a woman. It was kind of like if you want to do something, you better be the hardest working individual in the room, in the ring,
Yep.
whatever it may be. It was never like, oh, because you're a girl, you have to work harder or anything like that. So I think I have a unique, I don't know if unique is the right word because I feel like that is fairly common across agriculture, but I think I have a perspective that maybe some cannot relate to in terms of just kind of my upbringing surrounding the conversation about kind of women in agriculture. And it really wasn't until I got to college that I realized not everyone had that experience or has that experience of kind of, you know, people who are their cheerleaders and are empowering them, motivating them to continue to do things just because they want to do it, not because, you know, they shouldn't because they're a woman or whatever it is. And so for me, college was the first experience where I kind of had some negative interactions because I was a woman or was told to dress a certain way and talk a certain way and dye my hair a certain color of all of these different things to make sure I kind of like fit the mold of what you know, maybe an old man taking reasons might be looking for. And so that was a change for me. And instead of me just being the best, I had to also do all of these other things. And so that was kind of like my first interaction with like really realizing that there was a difference and there was kind of this nuance to, you know, being a woman. And so that was eye-opening to me and something I kind of filed away and it didn't really pull back up until I kind of went down this rabbit hole of trying to figure out what exactly I wanted to do and what I could add to my portfolio of businesses, if you want to call it that, and kind of activities and passions. And so for me, I think it's really important because the ratio, even of just like women, girls in higher education, for example, like the boy to girl, women to man ratio is insane. We definitely outnumber men in the classroom in higher education, in FFA organization, 4-H, all of those different things. And so for there not to necessarily be like a designated place for women or girls in the industry, like that's crazy to me because there has to be, because that's, we're overpowering in terms of just sheer numbers from different organizations and involvement things. And so for me, when I did realize I had been interviewing mostly and all women for the podcast, I kind of decided to really lean into that from the standpoint of like, okay, I'm really passionate about women in agriculture. You know, knowing that they have a place in this industry no matter what they want to do. You might have to work a little harder or, you know, do some different things to get ahead, but there's definitely a place if you want to be involved. So that was like one aspect of it. And then I'm also super passionate about connecting with consumers. So I kind of went to my big whiteboard that I write all of the crazy things that swirl around in my head on. And I was like, how can I make this work? And so my goal slash purpose of highlighting women in agriculture truly is to hopefully connect with a consumer. If you just look at the sheer numbers of who is making the food decisions for families in the United States, it's women. They're going to the grocery stores, they're making the purchasing decisions. So my thought was, okay, how can I connect with those individuals? Okay, we're going to share the story of women to connect to people who are making food purchasing decisions and decisions to feed themselves, but also their families. And so that was really kind of the route I decided to take, and where all of this other expansion of this whole idea about women in agriculture. And now I feel like it's such a popular like hot topic that's kind of taken off, where I'm super excited about that because I think it's definitely something that should be talked about and should be celebrated, obviously. But I think also my take on it may be a little bit different than some of the other people who are kind of focusing on women in ag. So hopefully that kind of explains a little bit about the background of things.
Yeah, for sure. And I love what you said about like being raised in a family that didn't treat you differently because you were a woman. And I think that that is one area that, for me personally, like I'm proud to be a woman in agriculture. I am so proud of the businesses that I've built, and I'm proud to be a voice in agriculture. Have I dealt with my fair share of adversity because I'm a woman? Absolutely. But I absolutely am stronger because of all of those. And I am the person I am today and have the voice I do today because of the resistance that I faced early on. And I'm a big believer that like you can either use that as a like catapulting trampoline, or you can use that as like your excuse to give up. And use it as your excuse not to give up. Use it as your like driving fire that you have underneath you. But then also like I'm a big believer that I am at every single table because every single seat that I have is because of my passion and my knowledge and who I am as an individual, and not because I'm a woman. And I think that
Yes.
that is an area in agriculture that we need to continue to foster well, because there are so many other organizations or other industries out there that love to highlight that they're like women-led industries, but then they almost highlight it so much that it's like you're at this table because you're filling a diversity box. And I never ever want to be at a table just because I am a woman. I want to be at a table because I deserve to be at that table. Don't get me wrong, we have our fair share of adversity issues that we deal with, but it's still one of those things that's like have a lot of passion behind you, and you're going to go through crap, but don't let it be the stuff that takes you down. Can you talk a little bit more about just your side, like your passion for agriculture, but then also your passion for higher education, women in agriculture, but then your passion for higher education, and how those kind of intertwine and stuff?
Yeah, for sure. And also, like the point you just made, I think is so important because I totally agree with that. I think it's you have to be conscious and aware of how you're going to use that whole like women in ag thing, because I think it can be played many ways. And also for individuals like me personally, like I didn't really ever think like, oh, I have to marry a rancher in order to be involved in the cattle industry. Like I am the rancher kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that has also been like a good like mind, not even mind shift, because that's always kind of been my mindset, but I think I've gotten a lot of like questions about that because people think like you have to marry into agriculture or, you know, kind of go that route, when I really think that is like further from the truth in today's age and society. But in terms of passions and kind of all of the things I have going on, I joke that I'm like a serial entrepreneur, good or bad sometimes, because I'm literally right now looking at 2025 of like, okay, where do I need to trim some of this fat because there's just too much going on. But when I decided to go back to school, and then obviously it's worked well because I work at the university, so it's complemented my time on campus very well. I really, my goal was like, how can I make all of my passions kind of intertwine, which has been difficult. And sometimes they don't always intertwine like black and white on paper. It's more of a like big picture. How does this all feed together? So yeah, so I have like my full-time job here at A&M, AgChicks, which is obviously the podcast, and then also a lot of social media. Well, not, I wouldn't say a lot right now because I'm trying to finish my PhD, but social media, like working with brands, those types of things that I never thought I would be into, but here I am. And then also my mom and I have a business, Junk and Disorderly. So we have home decor and antiques and those types of things. And so we have that business. Then we have like a strain of agritourism tied in there because we do barn sales on our family ranch. And then, yes, PhD student, trying to wrap that up. So there's so much going on, and people probably think like she doesn't actually do that much, or like she's insane, which 100%, I definitely am insane, but I do 100% do all of those different things. Again, sometimes not sure how it all works together. But one thing that I have kind of appreciated at this stage in life is if you have a passion for something, like you can do that and you can pursue it, even if it's not necessarily like your full-time gig or your full-time job. Like there's so many different opportunities for you to do things that you're interested in and like are passionate about, even if it doesn't necessarily like have like a full-time job description. And for me, that's kind of like an epiphany, I guess, I had through AgChicks of talking to all of these different women who have so many things going on and are passionate about so many different things, of like, you don't have to fit into this little box of like, oh, I am a, again, for example, program coordinator for Texas A&M, and like, that's my life, that's all I can do. I can go to work from 8 to 5 and whatever's in my job description, like, that's what my life is. Like, yes, that's obviously part of my life, but there's 12 other job descriptions that I'm also doing. And so I think maybe I'm not the best person to give advice when it comes to that, because I probably overcommit, but I hope people understand you can do more than just the one thing that you maybe get a salary from, or has your insurance paid through, or whatever it might be. But again, I don't know if that fully answers your question, or kind of what the direction you were going, but yeah. And also, like, there's so many free resources, paid resources, anything you can think of out there to learn things. Like, I am 100% self-taught on website design, social media, podcast hosting, editing, all of the things. Now diving into like videography and photography and things I'd never even like thought I could have a passion for or an interest in, because I was like, oh, you've been doing it for 15 years. Like, just pick up a dang camera. Like, you can do so much with your phone camera. Like, there's just, I don't know, there's a lot you could do to expand your skill set and also kind of evolve passions, I guess.
Yeah, and I love what you were just talking about with the fact that like not finding identity in your job. And I think that that is such a good outline for no matter where you are in life, whether you're a young college student or whether you're developed in your career, of not what do you say when someone asks who you are? Like, who are
Yeah.
you? And if you are saying that I am a program coordinator, honey, you need to reevaluate like your where you find your identity and where you are like laying your foundations for. And you know what? You don't have to find deep passion or deep love from the thing that provides you insurance and a salary. You really don't. It can be one of those side projects. It can be the fact that, like, because you have a salary and insurance and all of those things paid for, you are now able to go do these other things. You are now able to go do a podcast for free, or you're now able to go do agritourism and like other things that you find passion in that maybe don't pay the bills, or at least they don't pay the bills right now. And so it's, where do you find so much joy and passion that it explodes out of you? And you know what? It took me a while to get to that point. It took me a while to figure that out. And like you were talking about earlier, of like writing down what you do love and what you don't love, that's just as important as figuring out like how to get to that point. And finding that thing that you do love is figuring out the things that you kind of really don't like. And it took time to get there and figure out really who I am and what I do and all of the things. But there is so much more to life than just your 9 to 5. And I really just loved what you said about not finding identity in.
Yeah. And I think that's been, like you said too, like a learning journey for me, because I think I thought, the typical thing, like, again, you graduate, you get a job, that's your life. And then, like, if you don't like it, okay, you could change your job. But
Mm-hmm.
like, I like my job and I enjoy my job, but there's so many other things I want to do. And I have so many other hours in the day, out before, after, weekends, whatever it might be. And so, and that's truly kind of, again, the reason, which I didn't answer this when you asked about higher education, but truly the reason I did decide to go back to school as well was to get more tools in my tool belt, if you will, for ag communications. But I kind of also saw a gap between, we have Texas A&M, like, obviously I'm biased, but like, we have a very strong College of Agriculture and Life Sciences. We have incredible students who graduate from this university who go out into the industry, but are they really able to go out and communicate with consumers about where their food is coming from, and have those conversations even in the grocery store? Like, do they have the tools that any ag individual should probably have if they are a part of the industry? And so that's really kind of, again, another passion, I guess, that I have somehow figured out how to weave into all of this between social media and women in agriculture and all of these different things. That's really kind of my end goal when I'm done. My research is focused in social media and how can we leverage people who are really good at social media to be advocates for our industry, but also to learn from. And so my kind of end goal is to teach a class that really kind of bridges the gap between the consumers and producers, obviously, but even at a deeper level, like students in the College of Ag and Life Sciences, to really be able to go out, no matter what their major is, no matter what their background is, to have simple conversations about where food is coming from. And so that is really another kind of, I guess, connection piece. And that's like what really fires me up. If we were to like talk about identity and all of those things, like that's where like all of these other things that I'm doing, I feel like contribute to that kind of bigger goal. And so there's a lot going on right now and a lot going on behind the scenes that I'm still navigating and trying to figure out. And also, like, you can take as many business classes as you want, or online webinars or whatever, but like once you're in the day to day of like running your own businesses and like being the person who is responsible for all of the decisions, all of the money, all of the everything, like it's really hard to prepare for that. And so if there is somebody listening who like wants to go down this journey of a side hustle or add like extra passions to their daily life, it's a grind for sure. And I think sometimes we see like the highlight reel on social media of like, oh my gosh, she's selling t-shirts and she's making so much money at it. Like that's your thought, right? But you're not thinking about all the other things that have to go into that sometimes as well. So yeah, there's so much to dissect and get into. And I think really the big thing though is knowing like you don't have to fit into a box. You can be multi-dimensional and multi-passionate, and like that's very much okay, and it makes you who you are.
Yeah. Can you share a little bit more about the concept of like no matter where you are in life or no matter where you are in agriculture, like sharing your story? Like maybe it's through social media, maybe it's in grocery store aisles, maybe wherever it may be. Can you just share a little bit more about that of like the kind of just that concept and stuff?
Yeah, and I think that's also changed for me over probably the last 2 years, because I think I had this like thought of like everyone needs a social media page that's involved in agriculture, and you need to be like telling your story and all of the things that you see, right, that you scroll through. But actually being involved with the NCBA Trailblazers, I was on last year's class or cohort, I guess is the correct term there. But being around individuals who truly come from all aspects of the industry and having people who are comfortable with sharing online, having people who are way more comfortable having like one-on-one interactions with other producers or even their employees. Like they run feedlots and they have just talking to like their employees and making sure their employees know what's going on and know why they're doing things. So that really gave me like, again, a different perspective on, it's super important to share our story. However, I don't know if everyone should share their story on social media. If they, first of all, don't want to, or like they don't feel like they are equipped to do so, or maybe their story like is just kind of adding to the noise also. So really like figuring out where your skill set is in terms of sharing your story, whether that is on social media or public speaking, or again, simple interactions in the grocery store. Like I cannot tell you the amount of times I've gone to the grocery store, which I'm usually in a rush, so I need to like plan time to like go and observe. But the amount of times I go to the grocery store and I'm like in the meat department and I look around and there's people just like standing there with like two different options in their hands, or like going back and forth, like looking at the different things, obviously trying to make a decision on what to buy. And I have definitely had people like, if I go and I'm very quick about what I'm grabbing and grab it, put in the cart and roll, like I've had people say like, hey, like, why did you grab that? And then I like, okay, back up. Like, look, first of all, like, how can I help you decide, or what are you deciding between? Like, what questions do you have? And sometimes those are like the most powerful interactions you can have, because then they feel confident about what they're putting their money towards. And then maybe the next time they go, they won't have questions. So again, a long-winded response to your initial question there, but I don't think like the sharing your story, again, doesn't, it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. And I think it really kind of goes back to what you're the most comfortable doing and where you feel like you would have the most impact, kind of based off of your skill set and knowledge, whatever that might be.
Yeah, and I know for me personally, I see like a big gap in people feeling like they don't have something to share because it doesn't hit consumers. I feel like, for example, if you are a communications student at Texas A&M or Kansas State University or something like that, and you are afraid to share your story because you're not at your end goal yet, because you're still in college and you're not like actually doing a job yet, that is a limiting belief that I feel like you need to squash, because there are advocates for agriculture that advocate like to consumers, and then there are advocates for agriculture that advocate to other advocates,
Mm-hmm.
um or just other people within agriculture. And I think that both of those places have really strong roles in ag and for advocating for the betterment of the entirety of agriculture. We need both. We need people that are empowering the masses within agriculture to go and do it, but then we also need the people that are combating truths and doing things directly with consumers. And there is a role for both of them. And I feel like no matter where you are, you have something to share. And it doesn't have to be on social media. It does not have
No.
to be you are doing daily vlogs on TikTok, or that you are dancing out with the cows or doing something like that. And if that's what you do, then all power to you. I love that you do that. But it can literally be that you're a college student and you're in the College of Ag and you're in your first 2 years and doing gen eds, and you have to go to the English department and do English 102 or something like that. And you sit next to people that you normally wouldn't sit next to and talk about agriculture, and you share your story that way. It does, like you said, Allie, it is not a one size fits all. It looks very different for everyone. And honestly, like college or your young years are the perfect time to just test the waters and figure it out. And it's going to change as you change and grow in your careers, as you grow in your life, as you grow in your businesses and things like that. It's going to look different. But that's the fun part. Like, it's gonna change, and agriculture is gonna change, and like, heck, we don't know if TikTok is even gonna be a thing by the time this podcast gets released in February. Like,
Right.
so it's all gonna change, and I think that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, no, and that going kind of back to your point there for a second, um, I so with my degree plan, I had to take communication classes and statistics classes that were not necessarily like in the College of Ag. And so I was kind of like, oh man, like I don't want to go to main campus for these, like that kind of thought process behind some of those. But that was where like I decided to, when I got into those classes, like okay, every paper, every project, like I'm going to make it connected to agriculture, obviously because that's easy and what I like, but because a lot of those, like we had to do a presentation or get peer review things. And so the questions and conversations that sparked in those classes because of like my assignments was insane. And so I think like, and still like some of my group projects, that we talked about things, or they'd be like, wait, you're involved in agriculture? Like I still get text messages from some of them of like, hey, like I saw a cow today and thought of you, or like things like that. Like these are student athletes on campus and like have like their own platforms and stuff. So just like making those connections, they don't have to be monumental. They don't have to have a million views, like just small things that connect with people, because at the end of the day, that's really, again, where I think the most impact can happen is those small connections where then you're thought of the next time a decision's being made or they see a cow when they're driving by or something like that. Just to connect everyone, because the world is crazy and hard, and sometimes it's good to just see a cow and think about someone that you used to know.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what you said about like those small connections are probably the most impactful connections. I truly believe that they are as well. Those are the connections where you're actually forming a pretty personal relationship with someone. And so then they feel empowered to be able to come to you about those questions. Where if like you're advocating on social media, yeah, you might be hitting hundreds of thousands of people, but do those hundreds of thousands of people feel empowered to ask you questions? Do they feel empowered to like, do they feel a connection there where they feel like they can come to you? And some people on social media do a phenomenal job at that, and really forming a connection with people. But then, like you said earlier, of like, are you just adding to the noise? If you're deciding to advocate on social media, great, but what's your thing? What's that golden egg that makes you different? What's that one thing that like stands you out from everyone else? Or what audiences are you hitting that maybe are in a sense unreached? Are like, how does that look for you? And really finding a way to make your story original and make your elevator pitch for when you're in person or whether you're sharing your entire life on social media. I think that everyone kind of has a place, and especially just speaking to the young adults out there, the people that are in college and stuff like that, test the waters, figure it out. Like, it's college is the perfect time to screw up royally and no one has to know about it. No
Nope.
one has to know that you royally screwed up that advocating conversation that you were having with that student athlete. Like,
Yep.
it's the perfect
Turns
time
into
to
a
just play around.
yeah, it turns into a great lesson learned in a job interview later. Like
Exactly. Precisely. That is the best way to put it. That, like, hey, when you have a job interview in 5 years, now you have something to talk about when they ask the question of where is a time that you like made a mistake, and you can talk about that situation. And then only those three people have to know about this situation or stuff like that. It's just a great lesson learned, a great place to grow. And like we were kind of talking about earlier with networking, that again, this is a muscle that needs stretched. It is just communication in general. It's a muscle that needs stretched. Communicating with people is a art that is starting to be kind of lost. I don't think it's lost within agriculture. I think that we still do a really great job at empowering those within our industry to communicate outside of social media and stuff like that, and have really great conversations. But just in the general public, the art of communicating is looked over now, and communicating outside of our phones and stuff like that. So just continue to stretch that muscle, put yourself outside of your comfort zone, and don't be afraid to screw up, because we all have.
yeah, no, for sure. Lots of failures and missteps and lessons learned. Lots of lessons learned. For
Yes,
sure.
absolutely. Well, Allie, if given the opportunity, I think you and I could probably yap for a whole nother hour if we were able to. But I would love to start rounding out the podcast and discuss what your one piece of advice is that you would like to leave for the next generation of agriculture.
Yeah, my one piece of advice is that we need you, which I guess is not advice necessarily, but there is about to be, and it's already kind of started, a huge kind of generational shift and gap between, the older generation and the newer generation. And there's lots of statistics and studies and stuff that you could dive into if you really wanted to, but there is, this shift that has allowed for a question of like who's going to run the next generation of agriculture. And so if you have a passion, if you have an interest, even if you're not really sure where that fits into the industry, like please explore it and ask questions. And right, we've just talked about networking and all those different things for the last however long. Like lean into that, because there really is a space for you and there's a need for you. So please take advantage of resources and people, because like I said, kind of when we started this, people in agriculture, I think, really want that next generation to succeed and be involved. And so take advantage of those opportunities while those people are still around and ask those questions to help you in the next stage of life. But also don't be afraid to implement your own ideas and perspectives and thoughts on things, because that's the only way the industry moves forward, is if we continue to change and evolve with the world around us. So that would be my advice, I guess. I don't know if that was advice necessarily, but my thoughts on it, if nothing else.
Hey, you know what? Empowerment, advice, they're the same thing. And that was amazing, because the next generation, like we really do need you in agriculture. Agriculture needs you, and we want you here, and we want you to find the thing that lights your soul on fire, and we want you to get involved and be a member of those small town communities, or whether you're a member of a small town community or whether you're sitting in a corporate office in a metropolitan area still advocating for agriculture, we need you and we want you here. And everyone has a voice, and it's a journey to find it, but I I think a lot of things that Allie and I talked about today are hopefully just some words of encouragement for you guys, or just some thought provoking ideas for ways that as young individuals in agriculture, you can continue to develop those strengths and just work on building those muscles and all of the things like that. Allie, if people loved this conversation today, where can they find you? We'll have all of your links linked down below, but just share a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, so I'm AgChicks on everything, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and then also my website is www.agchicks.net, which is confusing, but it's .net. And it's Spotify, all of the podcasting platforms. It's on everything. So type in AgChicks anywhere, and hopefully you'll find it.
Yes, definitely. After you guys give a listen to this episode, go check out Allie's podcast. She has some really awesome episodes and some really great guests that she has on and stuff like that. Just as young women in agriculture, young individuals in agriculture in general, she is an amazing voice and hopefully an inspiration to all of you people listening and all of the things. So make sure you go check out the show notes. Go follow Allie on all of the things. Send her any DMs, questions that you might have from this episode, and we will see you all next week on another episode of The Next Generation. Thanks for tuning in.